The letter felt brittle in my hands, the paper thin and yellowed like an ancient bone. It had arrived unannounced, tucked into a plain manila envelope with no return address, just my name and the crumbling address of the estate. Raj, that was me. The rest, the labyrinthine address of Blackwood Manor, felt like a whispered curse. I never knew a distant relative, never heard the name Blackwood uttered in my family's hushed conversations. Yet here it was, a testament to a lineage I'd always suspected was fractured, lost. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the peeling paint on the ceiling a familiar, depressing constellation. Outside, the city's perpetual hum, a sound I usually found comforting in its anonymity, now grated on my nerves. I was drowning in debt, the kind that clung to I like damp wool, and the few freelance gigs I managed to land barely kept the wolves from the door. This letter, this unexpected inheritance, felt like a lifeline, a sudden, violent tug from the depths. The will was short, oddly formal, penned in a looping, archaic script. It spoke of Blackwood Manor, its grounds, and its contents. And then the kicker, a clause buried deep within the legalese, promised sufficient compensation for the rightful heir to live in comfort and security should they choose to reside within its walls for a period of no less than 1 year. Comfort and security. The words echoed in the cramped space of my studio, mocking my current reality. Enough to escape this, enough to finally breathe. I imagined the house, a grand, forgotten dame shrouded in ivy, filled with dusty treasures and forgotten histories, a place where I could finally outrun the creditors, the constant gnawing anxiety. The thought was intoxicating. I needed this. I deserved this. My colleague, a perpetually harried woman with ink stains on him fingers, found me staring blankly at my monitor, the letter spread out beside it. "Still dreaming of lottery wins, Raj?" he asked, his voice laced with the usual sympathy. I managed a weak smile, something like that. She gestured to a pile of overdue invoices. "These aren't going to pay themselves, you know." The weight of it all settled back onto my shoulders. I know I'm working on it. But the truth was I wasn't. My mind was already at Blackwood Manor, picturing the vast, empty rooms, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind through ancient trees. The journey there was longer than I anticipated. The city gave way to sprawling suburbs, then to rolling fields that gradually became more desolate, the roads narrower, the trees taller and more imposing, their branches skeletal against the bruised twilight sky. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something vaguely metallic, like old pennies. When I finally saw it, Blackwood Manor was less a dame and more a starved, gaunt creature. It rose from a tangled expanse of overgrown gardens, its stone facade stained and crumbling, windows like vacant eyes staring out from beneath heavy, moss-laden brows. No birdsong, no distant traffic, just the sigh of the wind through the skeletal branches of the trees that clawed at the sky. The gates, wrought iron twisted into elaborate, unsettling shapes, hung precariously from rusted hinges. My car, a sputtering relic that had seen better days, felt absurdly out of place on the cracked, weed-choked driveway. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Cobwebs, thick as spun sugar, draped from the chandeliers, catching the weak beams of my flashlight. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the floorboards. I dismissed it as the house settling, the ancient timbers groaning under their own weight. But as I explored, a growing unease began to prickle at the back of my neck. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming, a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and cavernous rooms, each filled with furniture shrouded in white sheets like forgotten ghosts. The hum seemed to follow me, a low, persistent thrum that I couldn't quite place. It was like the sound of distant machinery or perhaps something deeper, more primal. I found the main study, a vast room dominated by a massive oak desk. On it, beneath a thick layer of dust, lay a single tarnished silver key. It was heavy, intricately carved. Beside it, another letter, this one on parchment that felt strangely warm to the touch. This one was different. It wasn't legal jargon. It was a message penned in the same looping hand as the will. The house remembers, it read. It watches, it waits. You are not alone here, Raj, not ever. My breath hitched. The hum intensified, a subtle shift in the air pressure. Was I truly alone? What did the house remember, and what was it waiting for? The low hum was still there, a phantom vibration under my feet. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the persistent unease. It was just the house settling, I told myself. Old houses creak. Old houses groan. but this felt different. It felt deliberate. I swept the flashlight beam across the grand, dust-sheeted ballroom. Cobwebs thick as cotton candy draped from the chandelier, catching the light like spectral lace. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something faintly metallic like old pennies. I'd been here for 3 days, 3 days of sifting through the detritus of a life I'd never known, 3 days of wrestling with the sheer size of this place. It was less a house and more a monument to forgotten opulence. My great-aunt Ilara, I'd never even heard her name until the lawyer's letter arrived. A recluse, apparently. The will was equally bizarre, promising a fortune contingent on my residing here for a full year, a year in this mausoleum. I dismissed the initial oddities. A door found ajar that I distinctly remembered closing. A faint whisper that sounded like my name, lost in the sigh of the wind through broken panes. My own mind, I'd reasoned, isolation playing tricks. But the hum, that was new. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. It was a steady, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very stones. I decided a change of scenery was in order. The study, with its towering shelves of leather-bound books, felt too heavy, too charged with the past. The kitchen was a cavernous, cobweb-festooned space, the ancient stove a rusted relic. I needed something lighter. The lawyer had mentioned a recreational wing. A strange addition to such a somber estate, but perhaps it would offer a reprieve. I found the corridor leading to it after a good 20 minutes of exploration. It was narrower than the main halls, the walls lined with faded portraits of stern-faced individuals who seemed to follow me with their painted eyes. The air grew cooler here, carrying a damp, earthy smell. I pushed open a heavy wooden door and stepped into a space that was jarringly out of place. It was a water park after hours, slides empty, pumps still running. The dim emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows across the slick, brightly colored plastic of the slides. They coiled and twisted like monstrous serpents in the gloom, their once vibrant hues dulled by the pervasive damp. The air was thick with the sharp, chemical tang of chlorine, a scent that should have been invigorating, but here felt cloying, suffocating. The sound was the most striking thing. A constant, rhythmic thump-slosh from the unseen machinery that kept the water flowing, even in this dead of night. It was a heartbeat, a mechanical pulse that echoed the hum I'd felt earlier. I walked onto the rubberized matting, my footsteps making a soft, squelching sound. The water was still pooling at the bottom of a large, circular pool, reflecting the dim lights in shimmering, distorted patterns. I ran a hand along the cool, smooth surface of a slide. It felt unnervingly alive, slick with a film of moisture that clung to my fingers. A faint, almost imperceptible breeze stirred the stagnant air, carrying with it a new scent. Not chlorine, not damp concrete, something else. Something sweet yet sickly, like overripe fruit left to rot. My flashlight beam caught movement, a ripple in the pool. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was probably just a drip from one of the pipes, I told myself, a loose tile. But my eyes were glued to the water's surface. It stilled, then rippled again, this time more deliberately, as if something beneath the surface had shifted. I edged closer, my boots making that unnerving squelch. The hum of the pump seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I leaned over the edge of the pool, my heart racing. The metallic tang from the ballroom was stronger here, mingling with the sickly sweet odor. Then I saw it. At the very bottom of the pool, barely visible in the murky water. Something was lying. It wasn't a tile. It wasn't a piece of debris. It was pale, and it looked disturbingly like a hand. My stomach lurched. I backed away, stumbling on the slick matting. My flashlight beam wavered, the circle of light dancing erratically. The pumps continued their relentless rhythm. Thump-slosh, thump-slosh. Was I seeing things? There was this another trick of the isolation, but the image was seared into my mind. That pale, unnatural stillness at the bottom of the pool. What was that hand doing there? And more importantly, whose was it? The hum, I realized with a jolt, was coming from outside. Not the walls, not the floor, but beyond. I'd been so focused on the house, on the dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam, I'd forgotten the world still existed beyond these suffocating walls. I padded to the tall, arched window, the glass thick and rippled like ancient ice. Outside, moonlight painted the overgrown grounds in shades of silver and deep indigo. And there, beyond the skeletal trees, was the source of the sound. The water park. I'd seen it from the road when I first arrived, a garish splash of color against the muted greens and browns of the countryside. Now it looked like a forgotten kingdom. Twisted metal slides, slick and dark, rose like monstrous, silent serpents against the night sky. The air, even from this distance, carried the faint, metallic tang of chlorine, sharper than I remembered from childhood visits. The hum was louder now, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate not just through the ground, but through my very bones. It was the pumps, I guessed, still churning, still working, even in the dead of night in this empty place. A strange compulsion seized me. I had to get closer. The will had mentioned this place, a bizarre codicil about a legacy tied to the laughter of children, now silenced. I dismissed it as the ramblings of a senile old man, but now it felt like a taunt. I grabbed my coat, the moth-eaten wool smelling faintly of damp earth and something else, something acrid and unpleasant I couldn't quite place. The front door groaned open, a reluctant sigh of ancient wood. The air outside was cool, carrying the scent of pine and wet soil. The hum drew me forward, a siren song of mechanical industry in the heart of this desolate landscape. As I neared the water park's perimeter fence, the smell of chlorine intensified, stinging my nostrils. The hum was a physical presence now, a low-frequency tremor that made my teeth ache. The fence was chain-link, rusted and sagging in places, easily bypassed. I slipped through a gap, my coat snagging on a sharp barb. Inside, the silence was profound, broken only by the relentless, throbbing pulse of the pumps. The slides loomed above me, their plastic surfaces gleaming wetly under the moon. I ran my hand along the cool, smooth curve of a half-pipe, the material surprisingly yielding beneath my touch. It felt wrong, this place, a monument to forgotten joy, now powered by an unseen, relentless energy. I found myself drawn to the main wave pool, a vast, concrete basin. The pumps were housed in a small, utilitarian building nearby, its metal door slightly ajar. The hum was deafening here, a relentless barrage that seemed to press in on my eardrums. I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with the chemical tang and the metallic scent of oil. Massive pipes snaked across the floor, some dripping with condensation. In the center of the room, a colossal pump shuddered, its metal casing vibrating with immense power. And then I saw it. Etched into the concrete wall, barely visible beneath a layer of grime, was a series of symbols. They weren't random scratches. They were deliberate, geometric, almost familiar. My breath hitched. I'd seen them before in the old study, etched into the leg of the writing desk. The same angular lines, the same unsettling symmetry. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was a connection. This was the house reaching out. I backed away from the pump, my eyes darting around the small room. The symbols seemed to pulse in my vision, imprinted on my retinas. They were a language, I felt it, a language I was meant to understand. But what did they say? And why were they here in this echoing testament to lost revelry? Suddenly, a high-pitched whine cut through the low thrum of the pump. It was coming from the wave pool. The surface of the water, previously a placid mirror, was beginning to ripple. Not a gentle swell, but a frantic, agitated churn, as if something vast and unseen was thrashing beneath the surface. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose pipe. The flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam skittering wildly before settling on the agitated water. Another wave, bigger this time. It was as if the water park itself was waking, its dormant power stirred by the house's insidious influence. The whine grew louder, more insistent. The waves were becoming more frequent, more violent. This wasn't just the pumps working. This was something else. Something the house had awakened. What was it trying to show me? What was it trying to tell me? The hum. It vibrated through the soles of my worn boots, a low thrum that felt less like sound and more like a physical pressure against my eardrums. It wasn't the groan of ancient pipes or the whisper of wind through broken panes. This was steady, unwavering. It had been there, I now understood, for days. A subtle undercurrent to the house's symphony of decay, easily dismissed as background noise until now. I moved towards the window, my flashlight beam skittering across the warped floorboards. The glass itself was a murky brown, caked with years of grime, distorting the sliver of night visible beyond. But the hum was undeniable, a mechanical pulse emanating from the inky blackness outside. It pulled at me, an insistent, silent siren song. My hand trembled as I reached for the heavy velvet curtain, the fabric thick with dust that puffed into the air, catching the light like malevolent glitter. I yanked it aside, my breath catching in my throat. And then I saw it, or rather, didn't see it, not at first. The hum was louder now, a deep, resonant drone that seemed to seep into my very bones. The flashlight beam swept across the expanse, illuminating water, a vast, dark expanse of it, reflecting the faint, sickly glow of distant, flickering lights. It was a bizarre, incongruous sight, water, where there should have been only the overgrown grounds of the mansion. As my eyes adjusted, the shapes began to resolve themselves. Not a lake, not a flooded field, these were slides. They twisted and coiled, their vibrant colors muted by the night and the grime, hinting at a past life of shrieking joy. The hum, I now understood with a sickening lurch, was the sound of pumps working. This was a water park after hours, slides empty, pumps still running. An entire amusement park submerged or perhaps built into the water surrounding the mansion. It was impossible. It defied logic. The will had spoken of the mansion, of its grounds. It had never mentioned this drowned playground. A wave of disorientation washed over me. My mind struggled to reconcile the image before me with the reality I thought I knew. But this was something else entirely. A hidden world, a secret layer to the estate, humming with a life of its own. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, the chill seeping into my skin. The water was unnervingly still, a black mirror reflecting the skeletal slides. I strained my ears, trying to discern any other sounds, any sign of life beyond the relentless hum of the machinery. Nothing, just the water, the slides, and the ceaseless drone. A strange compulsion began to bloom within me. The will, the wealth, it all felt secondary now. This drowned water park, this impossible secret, was the true inheritance. A puzzle box, locked and submerged. I remembered my old notebooks, filled with half-finished stories, with characters I'd never fully fleshed out. I'd always been drawn to mysteries, to the unraveling of secrets, but this was no fictional construct. This was real, and it was terrifyingly, exhilaratingly mine to explore. My fingers traced the condensation on the glass, leaving a brief, clear streak. What was this place? Who had built it? And why was it hidden, forgotten, beneath the very grounds of the mansion I'd inherited? The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. How much water? How many slides? How deep did this watery labyrinth go? The mansion had already shown me what it could do, how it could twist my perceptions, how it could isolate me. What would this drowned world hold? What fears lurked beneath the surface of that black water, among the silent, skeletal slides? I backed away from the window, the hum still a tangible presence in the room. The dust motes, once just particles in the air, now felt like tiny, watchful eyes. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was a gateway, and the water park was the next level. My mind was already racing, cataloging possibilities, sketching out scenarios I needed to understand. I had to understand. The promise of wealth felt like a distant echo now, drowned out by the insistent pulse of the pumps. I needed to find a way out there. A boat, perhaps, or a way to drain it. The thought of wading into that dark water, with those silent slides looming overhead, was a prospect that made my stomach churn. But the desire to know, to peel back the layers of this impossible place, was growing stronger with every beat of my heart. What if the wealth wasn't in the mansion at all? What if the true fortune, or the true horror, lay submerged in that impossible water? A constant, insidious companion to the silence that had previously defined this place. The hum. It was the heartbeat of the house, a low, guttural pulse that seemed to emanate from the very foundations, from the damp earth beneath. I dismissed it, of course. Old houses make noises. They settle, they creak, they groan. But this was different. This felt intentional. I'd spent the morning trying to trace its source, my boots echoing on the bare floorboards of the upstairs rooms. Each step sent dust motes dancing in the weak shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something faintly metallic like old blood. I'd checked the basement, the crawl spaces, even the gaping maw of the unused fireplace in the main hall. Nothing. The hum remained, a phantom limb of the house, throbbing just beyond my perception. Raj, I told myself, letting this place get to I. It's just a building. An old, neglected building. But the tremor in my hands as I gripped the rusted railing of the staircase told a different story. It wasn't just the building. It was in the building, the will, the promise of wealth. It had felt like a lifeline, a way out of my stagnant existence. Now it felt like bait, a lure cast into the deep, dark waters of this place, and I, Raj, had swum right in. I found myself drawn to the west wing, a section of the mansion I'd largely avoided. It was darker there. The windows boarded up from the outside, creating a perpetual twilight. The hum seemed to intensify, a low growl that vibrated in my teeth. I pushed open the heavy oak door to what must have once been a ballroom. Cobwebs draped like macabre streamers from the high ceilings, and a thick layer of dust muted the faded grandeur of the room. A grand piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed and cracked, a silent sentinel. As I stepped further into the room, a faint scent, incongruous with the decay, pricked at my nostrils. It was the sharp, sterile smell of chlorine. Where was that coming from? The nearest water source was the old, stagnant well in the courtyard, miles from here. I paused, straining my ears. The sound wasn't loud, but it was persistent, a counterpoint to the ever-present hum. It was the sound of water moving, of pumps working. But this house, this forgotten relic, was miles from any functioning water system. The chlorine smell was stronger here. I ran my fingers over the plaster, feeling its rough, uneven surface. Then my hand brushed against something yielding, something that gave way beneath my touch. It was a panel, hidden, almost perfectly camouflaged within the crumbling plaster. My breath hitched. With trembling fingers, I worked at the edges, prying it open. It swung inward with a soft groan, revealing not a hidden room, but a shaft. And from its depths, the unmistakable roar of churning water. It was louder now, a visceral thrum that made the very air vibrate. It was coming from below, from the shaft. The air that rose from it was cool, humid, and reeked of chlorine. The sound of the water was immense, overwhelming. It was like standing at the edge of an underground river, and beneath it all, the steady, insistent pulse of the house. Then I saw it, or rather I felt it. A shift in the air, a subtle displacement that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. A presence, not just in the room, but in the shaft. I stumbled back, my hands flying to my mouth to stifle a cry. My eyes darted around the dusty ballroom, searching for an escape, for anything that could explain this impossible reality. The piano keys seemed to shimmer in the gloom. The cobwebs stirred, though there was no breeze. The hum intensified, a deafening roar that filled my head, drowning out all thought. I looked back at the open panel, at the gaping maw of the shaft. The rushing water, the unseen movement. The pervasive hum, it was all connected. The house wasn't just old, it was alive. And it was drawing something from this hidden place. My gaze fell upon the piano again. The yellowed keys, they seemed to beckon. A single, discordant note, sharp and shrill, suddenly cut through the cacophony of the hum. It was followed by another, then another, a broken, jangling melody that seemed to emanate from the piano itself. No one was there, I was alone, but the music played on. And the water surged, and the hum was the sound of something waking up. What was it preparing, and for whom? The hum, a trick of the wind, the settling of old timbers, the groan of pipes. But it hadn't stopped. It had woven itself into the fabric of my days, a constant, low thrum beneath the floorboards, behind the peeling wallpaper, in the very air I breathed. Now it felt different. It felt watchful. My first instinct after the initial panic was to flee. But the will, the promise of wealth that had lured me here, was a chain I couldn't break. Not yet. Raj, I fool, I'd told myself, staring into the cracked mirror of my bedroom. I came for the money, now I have to earn it. Earning it, I was beginning to suspect, meant surviving it. The will was a puzzle, each cryptic passage a new lock on a door I didn't want to open. The greatest treasures lie not in what is seen, but in what is felt. One line read. Another, the echoes of your deepest dread are the keys to unlocking your true inheritance. Dread, the house fed on it. I felt it pooling in the corners of my vision, a viscous, shadowy substance that thickened with every passing hour. I needed proof, something tangible to show the world, to prove I wasn't losing my mind in this decaying monument to a forgotten relative. My phone had died days ago, the battery refusing to hold a charge, the signal a ghost I could no longer chase. The landline was dead, of course. Every attempt to leave the grounds had been met with a subtle, unnerving redirection. A fallen tree on the only accessible road, a sudden, blinding fog that materialized from nowhere, a pervasive sense of being watched, of being unwelcome, that made my skin crawl and my feet turn back towards the mansion. My thoughts, however, were still my own, or so I hoped. I decided to retrace my steps, to systematically document every anomaly. I grabbed a notebook and a pen, the cheap plastic feeling unnervingly warm in my hand. I started in the grand hall. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of decay and something else, something cloying like overripe fruit. I wrote down the temperature drop near the grandfather clock, the way the portraits seemed to follow me with their painted eyes. As I sketched the intricate carvings on the fireplace mantel, a faint scratching sound emanated from within the stone. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I froze, my pen hovering. It was the sound of fingernails on rough stone. It was the sound of something trying to get out. My breath hitched. I forced myself to peer into the hearth. Nothing but soot and ash. But the scratching continued, insistent, growing louder, more desperate. I backed away, my heart racing a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. It was something. I fled the hall, the scratching echoing in my ears. I needed to get out. I needed air that didn't taste of despair. I remembered the will mentioning a place of manufactured joy, a place of laughter and simulated delight. It had to be a clue, a way out. I'd scoured the property maps, the faded blueprints I'd found in the library. There was no mention of a water park, but the phrase, it gnawed at me. Then, a memory surfaced. A faded photograph in the library, tucked away in a brittle album. A group of people, laughing, their faces blurred with age, standing in front of a brightly colored structure. A water park. It had been a different era, a different life. The photograph was dated decades ago. Could it still be there? I found an old, tarnished key in a drawer in the study, a key too large and ornate for any lock in the mansion. It felt heavy, significant. I remembered a small, disused outbuilding near the edge of the property, half hidden by overgrown ivy. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. The trees pressed in, their branches skeletal fingers reaching for me. The path to the outbuilding was choked with weeds, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The building itself was a ruin, its roof caved in, its walls crumbling. But there, tucked away in a forgotten corner, was a heavy, iron-bound door. The key fit. The air inside was thick with the smell of chlorine and stagnant water. My eyes adjusted to the gloom and I saw it. Rows upon rows of empty, colorful plastic slides, their curves stark against the dim light. The pumps, I realized with a jolt, were still running. A low, mechanical thrumming filled the space, a counterpoint to the hum of the house. This was the water park after hours, slides empty, pumps still running. It was vast, a labyrinth of empty chutes and murky pools. As I stepped further inside, the iron door slammed shut behind me with a deafening clang. The sound of the pumps seemed to intensify, their rhythmic pulsing vibrating through the concrete floor and up into my bones. I spun around, yanking at the door. It wouldn't budge, locked, trapped again. A faint gurgling sound reached me coming from one of the larger pools. I crept closer, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. The water was murky, opaque. But then, something shifted beneath the surface. A pale, elongated shape, slick and unnaturally smooth. It moved with a languid grace that sent a shiver down my spine. It was too large to be a fish. The humming of the house seemed to resonate here, amplified by the enclosed space. It felt like the pumps were breathing, drawing something up from the depths. I could feel the vibrations in my teeth. And then, from the murky water, a single, pale eye opened, unblinking and fixed on me. It was the eye of something that had been waiting for me. What was it, and how did it know I was here? The hum persisted. It was no longer a sound I could ignore, a subtle vibration that resonated in my teeth, a low thrumming beneath the floorboards. I tried to pinpoint its source, tracing it through the echoing halls of the mansion, up into the dusty attic, down into the dank cellar. It seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, a phantom breath drawn by the house itself. Sleep offered little respite. Dreams were a tangled mess of whispers and shadows, the scent of decay clinging to my pillow. My initial determination to unravel the mansion's secrets, to claim the promised wealth, had begun to fray. A gnawing unease had settled in my gut, a cold, damp weight that mirrored the perpetual chill in the air. The will, the cryptic clauses about true inheritance and unseen guardians, felt less like a riddle and more like a trap. Raj, I told myself. Raj, I don't run, but the house, it was learning me. It fed on my anxieties, twisting them into tangible, if fleeting, manifestations. The creak of a floorboard became the soft tread of a footstep, the rustle of leaves outside my window, a furtive scraping against the glass. One evening, the hum intensified, morphing into a discordant symphony of groans and sighs. It pulsed with a new urgency, drawing me, not with a physical pull, but with an undeniable psychic tether. I found myself outside, the damp night air a shock against my skin. The mansion loomed behind me, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised purple sky. The will mentioned a sanctuary, a place of reflection and cleansing. I'd scoured every inch of the estate, every dusty room, every overgrown garden. Where was this sanctuary? The hum seemed to guide me, a low, insistent throb leading me away from the manor, through the overgrown woods that bordered the property. My boots sank into the sodden earth, the branches clawing at my clothes. The air grew heavy, thick with the cloying sweetness of stagnant water. Then through the dense foliage I saw it, lights. It was a water park, abandoned, empty. The slides, once vibrant and inviting, were now skeletal husks, their plastic skin peeling, their vibrant colors faded to sickly pastels. The pools were stagnant, choked with fallen leaves and a film of algae. But the pumps were still running. A low, mechanical drone, a counterpoint to the house's hum, filled the air. It was a sound of perpetual, futile motion. I stepped through a broken fence, the rusted metal groaning in protest. The air here was heavy with the smell of chlorine and something else, something metallic, like old pennies. The hum of the pumps was louder now, a steady, unnerving rhythm. I walked amongst the silent rides, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The stillness was profound, broken only by the mechanical churn. It felt wrong, this place of supposed joy now a monument to decay and neglect. As I approached the largest slide, a towering structure of twisted plastic, the house's hum seemed to coalesce, to focus its energy on this place. The water park, I realized with a sickening lurch, was not separate from the mansion. It was an extension of it, a corrupted playground. A ripple disturbed the surface of a nearby wave pool. I froze. There was nothing there, just my imagination, the house playing its tricks. But then another ripple and another. They spread outwards, slow, deliberate, as if something were moving beneath the surface. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the steady thrum of the pumps. The water churned again, a swirling vortex forming in the center of the pool. It was impassable. There was no current. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the unnatural disturbance. It sounded like my name, Raj, but it was distorted, stretched, like a recording played backwards. My muscles tensed, ready to bolt, but my feet felt rooted to the slick concrete. What was this place, truly? And what was rising from the depths? The hum. It was a physical thing now, a tremor in my bones that made my vision blur. I'd followed it for days, a maddening siren song that led me away from the familiar, away from the dwindling hope of escape. The will, the fortune, it all felt like a cruel joke. This house, this thing, it didn't care about my inheritance. It wanted something else. I found myself outside, the night air thick and cloying, smelling of damp concrete and something acrid like burnt sugar. The hum was loudest here, a deep thrumming that vibrated through the soles of my worn boots. I looked around, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't the grounds of Blackwood Manor. This was a water park. It was a water park after hours, slides empty, pumps still running. The vast, empty expanse stretched before me, a skeletal playground under a bruised, moonless sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the mechanical sigh of the pumps and the relentless hum that now seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath my feet. The towering slides, slick and dark, loomed like monstrous, dormant beasts. The stillness was oppressive, a heavy blanket muffling all other sound. I could feel the cool, damp air clinging to my skin, raising gooseflesh. My mind, usually a frantic buzz of fear and desperation, felt strangely clear. The hum had done this, I realized. It had stripped away the noise, leaving only a stark, terrifying focus. I was in a place I didn't recognize, a place that felt manufactured, like a stage set for some unseen performance. I started walking, my boots crunching on loose gravel. The emptiness was disorienting. The once vibrant colors of the park were muted in the gloom, the plastic slides appearing slick and oily, reflecting the faint, sterile glow of emergency lights. A faint smell of chlorine, sharp and clean, fought with the cloying sweetness I'd noticed earlier. It was a nauseating combination. I imagined children's laughter, the shrieks of delight, the splash of water. I reached the central plaza, a wide, open space ringed by concession stands, their shutters drawn like dead eyes. The hum was a palpable force here, a pressure against my eardrums. I could feel it in my chest, a tightening sensation that made it hard to breathe. My hands clenched into fists. Blackwood Manor had brought me here. It had orchestrated this. Nothing, but I felt it, a presence, not a physical one, not yet, more like a ripple in the fabric of the night. The hum intensified, a low growl now. Just at the edge of hearing, I began to run. My legs pumped, but it felt like I was running through molasses. The ground seemed to resist me, the air thick and heavy. I glanced back, but the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was overwhelming. It was the same feeling I'd had in the manor, amplified 1,000-fold. I stumbled, my knee hitting the unforgiving concrete with a sharp crack. Pain shot up my leg, but I barely registered it. A faint light flickered at the top of the tallest slide, the Serpent's Coil, I remembered seeing on a faded map. It was an impossible light, a bioluminescent glow that pulsed with the rhythm of the hum. It was a trap, I knew it. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to flee, to find a way back to the familiar horrors of the manor. But the hum, it was a promise of an end, of understanding. I walked towards the Serpent's Coil, my steps deliberate. The light at the top of the slide pulsed faster, and with it, the hum grew into a deafening roar, a sonic assault that threatened to tear me apart. I could feel the concrete beneath my feet begin to vibrate violently. The pumps, their mechanical drones suddenly drowned out by the escalating hum, seemed to shudder. As I reached the base of the slide, a figure coalesced in the pulsing light above. It was the house. It was the entity. It was here, at the heart of this artificial, forgotten place. It spoke of loneliness, of regret, of the gnawing emptiness that had always been my companion. It offered solace, a release from the pain. All I had to do was surrender. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. My legs felt like lead. The hum reached a crescendo, a blinding, deafening wave that washed over me, stripping away thought, leaving only raw sensation. I saw flashes of my life, moments of joy, moments of despair, all swirling together in the chaotic vortex above. It was offering me oblivion, a final, merciful end to the torment. But was it truly an end, or just another beginning? And if I accepted, what would be left of Raj, the hum? This house, this thing, it didn't want to give me anything but itself. And I, fool that I was, had walked right in. Now I was here. In the water park after hours, slides empty, pumps still running. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of chlorine, and something else, something metallic and damp, like rust and old blood. The vast, cavernous space echoed with the ceaseless thrum of unseen machinery, a low, guttural pulse that vibrated through the concrete floor and up into my teeth. The slides, once vibrant and inviting, now stood like skeletal remains, slick with condensation and a film of grime. Each twist and turn was a dark, gaping maw. My flashlight beam, a thin, wavering line, did little to push back the oppressive gloom. It had led me through secret passages in the manor, down into its suffocating earth, and finally to this place. The will had mentioned a legacy, a reward for fortitude. I had thought it was about surviving the house. I was wrong. The house was the reward, or perhaps I was. The water, stagnant and murky, pooled at the base of the slides, reflecting the dim emergency lights like 1,000 dead eyes. The smell was stronger here, the metallic tang mingling with the faint, sickly sweet scent of decay. I moved deeper into the echoing expanse, my footsteps unnaturally loud on the wet tiles. Each splash, each drip sounded like a footfall behind me. My breath hitched. I told myself it was just the acoustics, the emptiness. The hum was loudest here, near the main filtration system. A monstrous, hulking beast of metal and pipes, it shuddered and groaned. A mechanical heart beating a frantic rhythm. It was more than just a pump, I could feel it, a consciousness woven into the metal, into the very water it churned. It was the source, the nexus, and the house was merely its extension, its physical manifestation. They weren't ghosts, not in the way I understood them. They were fragments, echoes of those who had come before, drawn in by the same promise, ensnared by the same hunger. The house fed on their fear, their despair, and then it absorbed them, adding their essence to its own. And the hum, it was the sound of that consumption, the constant, insatiable gnawing. My flashlight beam caught something glinting in the murky water. A watch. A man's watch, its face cracked, its hands frozen at some forgotten hour. My fingers brushed against something soft, yielding. I recoiled, a choked gasp escaping my lips. It was a hand, a shriveled, skeletal hand, its skin like parchment stretched over bone. I scrambled backward, my boots slipping on the wet floor. The hand remained, a silent testament to the house's true nature. It wasn't just a building, it was a predator, a trap, and I had walked into its jaws willingly, The will, immense wealth. The wealth wasn't gold or jewels, it was this endless, draining existence. They offered a release, a swift end to the torment. But that was what it wanted, to be consumed, to be absorbed. No, I wouldn't be another stain. I had survived the Manor's insidious games, its psychological assaults. I had seen its true face, and it was uglier than any nightmare. The hum intensified, a deafening roar in my ears. The water around me began to churn, disturbed by an unseen force. The pipes groaned, their metallic voices rising in a discordant symphony. The house was aware of my defiance. It was angry. I turned and ran, not back towards the manor, but towards the emergency exit I'd seen near the entrance. The hum was a physical pressure now, pushing against me, trying to anchor me, to drag me back into the heart of its hunger. My lungs burned, my legs pumped, but the distance seemed to stretch, the exit receding with every desperate stride. I could feel it behind me, a vast, unseen entity reaching, grasping. The water swirled, trying to trip me, to pull me down. Was this it? Was this the end of my fortitude? Then I saw it, the exit. I lunged, my fingers scrabbling for the push bar. The hum reached a fever pitch, a shriek of pure malevolence. My hand closed around the bar. I shoved. The door swung open, revealing not the night sky, but a blank, unyielding wall of gray concrete, a dead end. The hum seemed to mock me, a low, satisfied rumble. The hand, still visible in the dim light, seemed to beckon me closer. The house had won. But what did it truly want with me now?